And my name is Courtney Torres. I am the Special Programs Coordinator for Innovation and Commercialization. We are UTA's Tech Transfer Office. We manage all of the intellectual property on campus, and we also do entrepreneurship programming such as EpICMavs. We do a deep dive in the summer, and we partner with other outside organizations and universities. Today we are partnering with Tarleton State University. I have invited one of my professors in my master's program at Tarleton State, Dr. Jennifer Edwards. She will be going over crisis management for small business. So I'm very excited to see her presentation today. Would anybody else like to introduce themselves? And you could unmute and yeah, perfect. Kerrigan, do you want to introduce yourself? Yeah.
Hey, everyone can hear me. I had problems with the mute last time. Hi, everyone. My name is Kerrigan Rudd. This is my second time meeting with EpICMavs. I'm interested in creating a business that helps other small businesses with sustainable solutions. So thank you for having us. Thank you, Dr. Edwards, for coming and talking to us today.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. And you said Kerrigan?
Kerrigan, yes. You nailed it the first time early on.
Awesome. I'm a stickler for first names. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
I can go next. Hello, everyone. My name is Devin Peplow. I'm the program manager for Tech Fort Worth. We partner with UTA to help host EpICMavs, and so I'm very excited for today. I know when we were brainstorming and we were talking about crisis communication, I was very excited, especially everything that we've been through. I was really excited to see your insights into this. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you. It's very nice to meet you, Devin.
Would anybody else like to introduce themselves?
Sure. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I'm Victoria, and I'm interested in starting a business to help rural health, specifically cardiac rural health, and I find this very interesting. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Very nice to meet you, Victoria. Did you say specifically cardiac rural health?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. That's right up my alley. So it's very nice to meet you. Anything rural.
Nice to meet you too.
Okay. Anybody else want to introduce themselves?
Sure. I'm Scott Rinkus. I'm a fellow with the bioengineering department, getting my PhD in biomedical engineering. And I've done a little bit with the small business entrepreneurship before. Worked with a sort of a nonprofit, chairman of that nonprofit. But going back and getting my PhD in how to apply those skills and pick up some new stuff, some new skills and information from you guys, and to see what I can do with entrepreneurship after I get my PhD.
It sounds like you're on a very exciting track.
I've had a very convoluted career. I'm expecting it to keep going.
And that's what makes a great entrepreneur. Okay, does anybody else want to introduce themselves? I think we have a couple more people on the call. No. Okay, well, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Edwards.
Well, it's very nice to meet everyone, and it's very exciting to work with students from across the DFW landscape. We have such amazing businesses and corporations and universities and organizations as a whole, all across DFW and beyond, even in our rural areas. And so I'm excited to be here today because this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart because I studied crisis communication before the pandemic, and then now, goodness, I'm applying principles every single day. So I'm excited to speak with all of you about crisis communication when it applies to small businesses. So no matter if you have I've worked with individuals who are creating they have patents and they're creating the next best thing with Wi-Fi technology for the military. And then I've also worked with people who are have PLLCs, and they are they're very focused on holistic health. And so it runs the gamut, but I'm excited to work with all of you, no matter if you are in social sciences, engineering, or even education. Everyone can create a business, and it's important to know how a business can benefit you and also benefit your community. So let's dive in. And I want to verify that everyone can see my screen. Okay, so crisis management for small businesses. Just a little bit about me. I am a third generation entrepreneur. So, and I know that sounds funny, but my mother was an entrepreneur. She owned a child care center in a very rural area for 20 years. And then her father was an entrepreneur as well. So he actually you guys are going to laugh at me, but he actually owned a couple of nightclubs. So in a rural area. So I'm a third generation entrepreneur. No, I do not own a nightclub. I am a consultant. So that is my step into the entrepreneurship piece. And also I plan small scale and large scale events for rural areas. But also I am a professor of communication. I've been at Tarleton State since 2007, and it has been a long time, but it's a great place to be. But I work with colleagues from around the state and around the nation. And then I've been focused on crisis management for a very long time. So I'm excited to talk about that topic today. And also we have the Rural Communication Institute at Tarleton State. And so we focus on everything from rural health. We write grants focused on rural health, also rural education, and other rural endeavors to help people live, learn, and thrive in rural areas. Okay, so after a disaster, according to FEMA, between 40 and 60% of small businesses fail to open their doors after a disaster occurs. And so as a person who is a person of color and a female person of color with a small business in Texas, I've been looking at these statistics all across the nation, and it has been startling to me to know that so many businesses owned by people of color, and even businesses that are not owned by people of color, have failed to reopen their doors, especially if their business focused on large scale function. So if you think about restaurants, if you think about even healthcare to a certain extent, gyms, things of that nature, many of those businesses have not opened their doors, but again, because they do not want the potential liability that comes from opening their doors to a potential COVID case or more. So it's important to know that even in 2019, people were looking at the fact that small businesses, even after one small disaster, and in that sense, they were talking about a storm of some sort or a wide-scale electrical outage for one or more days, things of that nature. Those are all days that those businesses are not making money. So every day you're not making money, every hour you're not making money, you can't pay your employees, and also it's hard to operate with typical operation costs because as people are figuring out, the electric bill still needs to be paid, the mortgage or the lease still needs to be fulfilled, and then also just the everyday operations and maintenance expenses still happen. So after a disaster, speaking of that price point per day, $3,000 per day, when you think about small businesses with 1 to 500 employees as defined by SBA, $3,000 per day is how much it costs a small business not to operate. If you think about a mid-sized business, so from 501 to 999 people who are employed by that mid-sized business, it can cost a mid-sized business up to $23,000 per day that business is not in operation. And then with our large scale businesses, 1,000 or more, $84,000 per hour is the estimated per cost that large scale businesses incur when they are not open. And it's important to realize, especially even right now, we talked about those recurring costs. We talked about like the lights still have to be on, the water still has to be paid, the taxes still have to be paid. And those are things that the business is not, is not going to receive a break on, or if they do, it will balloon in a few months whenever the electric bill is eventually due. But that was another source from Howell 2019. And at any time, please feel free to raise your hand. I think that Microsoft Teams has that function, but also please feel free to just ask questions, because this is very pertinent information right now. If I presented this same presentation a year ago, people would say, okay, yeah, right, if the disaster strikes or whatever. But now it's when a disaster strikes. And I listen to a lot of international news when making decisions for my business. And so with the international news, when it comes to Canada and also when it comes to the BBC out of the UK, it's important to realize how decisions are going to affect businesses. So right now, even restaurants in New York and even factories and large-scale industries in New York and other northern states, they are grappling with the fact it's getting cold. We have COVID. We potentially have a COVID flu situation, and we still have to employ our employees, and we still have to serve our customers. So that's a very interesting pull in both directions that I want you guys to realize. And then also one thing that I'm very, very interested in is small business insurance. A lot of people, a lot of our large scale insurance agencies for small businesses are not covering a interruption of business right now, because that is not considered, or they considered COVID not to be potentially an act of God, and that's outside of the clause of the small business insurance. By the way, if you have a small business, make sure that you have small business insurance, and even though the packet is this thick, make sure you read those pages and label those pages, because you never know when you will have to refer back to it. Okay, so let's talk about resilience in a box. And I know that sounds very interesting, but to be resilient is to be able to successfully survive various situations. So basically it was the Chamber of Commerce Foundation. They had resilience in a box, strengthening communities globally. And so they basically had have a checklist on their website. And I thought that this was fabulous, because it requires small business owners to think about different items that they would normally not think about. So an example is, have you trained employees to assist? For example, respond to injuries, evacuate the building when an emergency occurs. That's not if, but that's when an emergency occurs. This is one thing that I need to be better at, but it is, have you regularly backed up your data? That's something that I admit I have not done in a couple of months, but it's important. If your laptop goes out, or if there is a flood from sprinklers, is your laptop backed up to like say the taxes are due and things of that nature, to be able to persist along normal business operations. Also, if you think about, have you assembled a team of individuals who know those key operations and can provide important perspectives when planning for and responding to disasters? So if the press comes, do you have people who are trained on basically responding to the press's questions? Or if the insurance adjuster shows up, do you have a person trained on what to say and what not to say? Because sometimes you, depending on the situation, you may not want to divulge everything because you might not have all of the information that you need. And then also just thinking about things from 360 degrees is very important when it comes to preparing for a disaster. I'll stop for a second. Do you guys have any questions about this one? Resilience in a box. I love that. Okay. Also, it asks you to rate your readiness. So how ready is your business? And then tally up your score, and then you can see the back page to see where your business stands. One thing that we'll talk about today is also, has the business put forth a current continuity or emergency or disaster plan in place? And have they tested that? So one thing that I really like about Tarleton is that they have a basically a scenario or a wide scale 2-day case study. If a disaster strikes, how do the emergency personnel respond? How does the university respond? How does the hospital respond? How does the locals, the state guard respond? So it has a wide scale event, and it's testing people's capabilities to deal with an emergency-based situation. How do local businesses respond? But that is something that you can also do with your employees when you have them, is that you can provide, especially during your training or professional development, a scenario, and they have to respond to that scenario. So even if it's in the confines of a 1-hour meeting in your professional development, or maybe it's a half-day training, but how would they respond to a situation? And it's important because people, unfortunately, panic during a crisis-based situation. Also, it says with resilience in a box, if you have a score between 0 and 20, your organization is unnecessarily at risk of interruption. And any interruption in business, as we refer back to the cost per day, is time is money. So you do not want to have a high risk of interruption with your business. So I will say, even with a small scale business, I have a small scale business, but I do training and development workshops all across the state. And so I want you guys to realize, even if you have a business and it's just you, or maybe you and another person, it's important to know how you would deal with an interruption of access to your data, an interruption in access to your building or your space. Or say, even if you have a hotel booked for a meeting space, and that hotel basically something happens to it, and you have 100 or 200 people signed up and paid for an upcoming event. So it's important to know what happens if. And when you have that plan, you're more likely to be able to pull out that page and refer to that plan to make sure that you are not going to panic. So that was the beginning level, if you think about just the checklist of things to know for your resilience plan. So for the intermediate level, it's protecting, the goal is to protect people, relationships, brand and communications, to protect data, protect operations, and also to protect inventory. And unfortunately, I know a lot of you have probably seen some data interruptions when it comes to school districts, especially small school districts all across the state have been subject to data hacking. So people have, in a bad way, not good way, but data hacking, and they actually have had their like some ransomware. So someone clicked something in an email, and then the school district or the school board had to vote to pay a ransom for access to their student data again. So it's important to know that it can strike a small one-person business or a large 10,000 person business. Also know that it's important to protect equipment. So especially if it's equipment that you will need to have access to. So I know one of you is very interested in bioengineering, and I'm not sure if you will work within a lab within the confines of a university, or I know various people, especially people who have served in the military who have their own labs now and their own space. But one thing that is important is to make sure that you protect your equipment as well, because what if someone goes in and steals your equipment or steals the data? Also, even if you're into farming or farm engineering, how do you make sure that your equipment does not experience interruption? Because it's very costly. I never knew how costly it was to repair a tractor, but apparently it's almost as much as it would cost to purchase a new tractor. So how do you protect your equipment if someone does something malicious to your equipment? Also protecting buildings, developing your business, and then disaster response, and then looking at lessons learned. So it's important to know, to be prepared for what you cannot foresee happening. So there is a business resilience notebook, and I love it. It's very comprehensive. And in fact, I had a conversation with one of my colleagues, and I said, you know what, I could do an entire course on business resilience, because it's very important. Even right now, it's very important when we're looking at it from the Chamber of Commerce perspective or the Small Business Development Center perspective. Business resilience is very important. And so this is something else from the U.S. Chambers of Commerce. So from the business resilience standpoint, this is what this booklet looks like. It is I'm not kidding, it's a huge notebook, but it has probably over 150 pages, but it's all focused on how your business can be more resilient when it comes to any potential interruptions. So think about things from a FEMA perspective. FEMA prepares us for what we cannot see or even know would happen. So who would have predicted that we would have been in the middle of a pandemic right now? But I imagine FEMA had a plan for that. Who could predict that your roof would cave in? I imagine FEMA has a plan for that for their individual buildings. But just know of the potential threats to your business and the potential disasters, man-made and natural, that could happen in your business. Also, this is Resilience in a Box, the second piece, and it talks about the top 20 tips for business preparedness. And it's important to know that even a very short guide like this can truly make a difference for your business, because it can help you prepare for the unknown. With the workbook, we'll go over this in a couple of seconds. Actually, it might be the next slide. There it is. But I want you to think about, just take a second and think about the businesses that you already have or that you want to create, and just think about what is one potential threat, either that is on this list or that is not on this list, that could be a threat to your business. And I can't see the chat, so if you would like to say that out loud, that would be great. But if you would like to type it in the chat, hopefully someone can tell me what is present in the chat as well. So when we talk about engineering, when we talk about rural health, especially when it comes to cardiac health, what are some potential risks? And not everyone at once.
Well, I can say in relation to wanting to work with small businesses and sustainability, just statistically alone, the fact that the business would rely on small businesses, and with the businesses that would fail under these conditions, that is probably the most major threat.
And then also, say if you fail to have access to your data, especially when it comes to sustainability, you need access to that data immediately, that could be, a potential threat as well. So yes, when we think of your SWOT analysis, whenever you are proposing to get that amazing funding from SBA or from your local lender, and make sure that you include that in your threats piece of your SWOT analysis. Thank you. Anyone else? So while you're thinking, I know it says fire, earthquake, tornado, flood, storm, landslide, and hurricane and typhoon. And I know that we can think, oh, we're in the middle of Texas, none of that will happen, especially when it comes to hurricane, typhoon, or landslide. But believe me, probably all of those have occurred in Texas. So it's important to prepare for the things that we cannot foresee. So if those are natural, those are acts are perceived as acts of God. But remember, I talked about insurance a couple of moments ago. You need to make sure that your insurance defines these as acts of God. So if you have a landslide or if you have a hurricane that occurs, you need to make sure that your building and also your business are protected. And so those are two primary focuses of the small business insurance piece. But you can also be protected for workforce, say if someone has a claim for workforce or things of that nature. It's important to be protected, period. Also, man-made data entry error. I know that sounds interesting, but say if you're in the banking industry and you happen to put 10,000 when the person only made a deposit of 1,000, that's a data entry error. Or say if you are doing rural health, and especially in the area of cardiac health, and maybe the information that was sent from rural area to suburban or urban area was maybe lost in translation, and maybe you only received half of the message when there were 2 sentences left that were the most important, and you entered some information that is not whole information, then that could also be perceived as a data entry error as well. We're also seeing that with nurses who are going out to homes and that nature. Terrorism happens as well, vandalism and sabotage. I imagine a lot of these businesses in, oh goodness, is it Oregon? A lot of our businesses in Oregon, I believe, have had the vandalism, and I imagine they never anticipated that they would have someone vandalize their space. But it's important to prepare for things that you cannot foresee again. And then also theft, security breach, power outage, epidemic, pandemic is not on the list, but pandemic as well, accident, civil disorder, also hazardous material, active shooter, and workplace violence. Hazardous material can also be a break in a gas line. So I've encountered that more than once, where there's a gas leak, and that is potentially seen as hazardous material, and that's hazardous to people's health. Or a carbon dioxide leak is hazardous to health as well. So no matter where you're working, you can have either. And it's important to know what happens to your employees if you have a deadline, something happens. What is your continuity plan? And continuity plan basically means what will keep your business in operation no matter if any of these happen.
And Victoria dropped in the chat, data being stolen or hacked.
Yes, that is a big one. And that is actually a growing, unfortunately, a growing industry right now. Industry not sanctioned by the government, but industry that is just happening right now with hackers or malware. So they hold your data ransom, and it's just really sad, but you have to be prepared no matter what. If you have basically done everything at the beginning level, so that's like the beginning checklist, like the resiliency plan, to the large scale book that we just mentioned as well, in the 20 item checklist for the intermediate level, then you can persist to the advanced level of business continuity and business resilience. And that means that you can look at the disaster resilient business workbook. And I'm not sure if anyone would say that they are at this level, but if you are, then you can actually download the disaster resistant business workbook. And so that's also a good tool for everyone as well, to make sure that you are preparing. And even if you don't plan to create a business right now, if you are working at a university, or if you're working for a nonprofit or a business or corporation, sometimes they'll have people in meetings, they'll ask you, hey, we're working on this project, raise your hand, work on that project, and you can apply some of the items that we are highlighting today in the beginning piece, the intermediate piece, or the advanced level piece. And also with that, there is a disaster resistant business toolkit as well. And I love a good toolkit, and I love a good workbook. So those are things that you can also keep in mind as resources. So some things I want you to keep in mind, 6 things. The first thing is, I want you to have a crisis management plan. So that means when you're thinking about your SWOT analysis, when you're thinking about and even after you get that funding, I want you to think about, and I'll just tell you the funding process, creating a 60-page SBA funding request guide or your business plan is fun. I'll just put it that way, but you also think 360 degrees around your business. So I will say, and also I have a template for a 1-page business plan as well, that can help you guys. If you don't want to do the 60-page, I have a 1-page template as well that you can have access to. But have a crisis management plan. And in that crisis management plan, think about the threats that you pinpointed on your business plan. Think about common crises and issues. So if we think about man-made disasters, natural disasters, electronic disruptions, rumors, think about that as well. I didn't see that anywhere, but rumors can drastically affect your business. So if you think about rumors about relationships, rumors about food and basically how clean or unclean a business is. That could be perceived as a rumor as well. But rumors are happening all over the place. Rumors that maybe the board member supported X or Y national campaign or political candidate. Rumors can ruin a business. So realize how you can develop a plan to address rumors as well. And also economic situations. Say if your bank goes out of business. I mean, there are safe holds for that, like being FDIC insured. But say if your bank goes out of business, or say if your investments go from being very high to very low. I'm just thinking about March, very high to very low. Also think about some other economic disruptions. Say if you had a lot of people frequenting your restaurant or your business, and then now you can't have anyone in your business. And in New York, you can only have people dine outside. And now they're creating bubbles, which I think is a really neat concept, like bubbles that you can put a table and 4 chairs, and that becomes your dining bubble. But are you really going to want to sit in a bubble when it's like 15 degrees outside and snowing? So just think about potential economic situations and how you can adjust to that. One way that businesses are adjusting to that is the fact that they are doing the takeaways or the drive-through pieces. I'll even tell you, I've been volunteering with the local food bank in 3 cities, and they have they've gone from hey, we're going to put your fruit and your meat and your dairy and the grain piecemeal into a box for you and bring your own box, to this is already prepackaged for you. Here's your box of items to last you for a month. And so even our government has done a pivot when it comes to crisis management. Okay, have a crisis management meeting. So after you've pinpointed those things that, oh goodness, this might happen to my business, have a crisis management meeting. So if you have an LLC or a limited liability corporation, and also if you have a sole proprietorship, and it's super simple to create a sole proprietorship, it takes a little bit more funding and more legwork to create your LLC, but I would schedule these meetings, and with an LLC, you're required to have at least 1 meeting a year, and to have that filed with your records. And you can input your crisis management meeting within your LLC meeting that you had to have annually. So it's a great reminder to have that crisis management meeting with your team. Also, you can pinpoint potential crises that you don't even think about. So maybe on this one, you think about your personal, as a business owner, you think about your personal perspective of crisis management. But then when you meet with your team, or maybe you form a trusted group of advisors that, they do not have any decision-making authority with your business, but potentially they are the ones who can provide you with a different perspective. They can also pinpoint potential crises as well. And last but not least, pinpoint the individuals who need to attend these meetings. So maybe you need someone from that's a trusted friend from a local bank. Maybe it's someone from the local, or who is retired from the local press. Maybe it's someone who is a insurance agent that you may or may not work with. But I would prefer maybe a friend and someone I did not have insurance currently with to be on that trusted group of advisors. But I would have that crisis management meeting for them to pinpoint potential crises that they see for your business as well. And then you can prepare for those. Also, I love response plans, y'all. So if something happens, like say if there is a riot of some sort outside of my business, I can pull up my sheet to say, you know what, and I have it in an electronic version, you know what, I can deal with this because I need to do this, and this. I'm good with that. I thought that there was going to be a rally outside of a location. And basically, I was ready to help the business owner respond to that. And there turned out not to be, that there were just a bunch of kids, our high school students, just, with their flags for one or more candidates. But I was ready to help the business owner respond because we talked about a response plan for that. One thing I do want to do before we go to the next piece, I want to show you something. Okay, so this is the local business that I work with, or one of the local businesses that I work with. So this business owner had to pivot. This person went from having 50-person large-scale events for kids and their parents, like having 75 people in that space, to having only space for 6 stations for parents and their kids. And so it's gone from a revenue model of, making $3,000 a month to not making as much per month, but just helping this person work through that. But having plexiglass, communicating that element of care, and also communicating that element of, we have the covering on the table, and that's easy to turn over from one group. They make the appointment, one group, turn it over, then you put another piece of paper down. And also you have the plexiglass as well. Then let's talk about the one-page crisis management worksheet. Okay, so I want you to think about the name of the crisis. So I just mentioned having a rally outside of a business. And that could also contribute to rumors as well. So if they're having a rally outside of their business, then are they supporting or not supporting this candidate? So rumors can make or break a business, but maybe the name of the crisis is a rally for a political candidate. The type of crisis would be that it is a man-made crisis. The type of year that the crisis is most likely to occur, election season, depending on where you're located. Key people to notify, I would definitely include the local police department, so whether it's county or whether it is city. And then also potentially the mayor would be on here as well, because was this sanctioned or was it not, by the mayor's office? And if it wasn't, then, the police can persist along their pathway as well. But these are only 2 key people to notify, but you can expand that as you need to. Also, it has possible responses. So possible response, and this is something that I use, but possible response 1, and then the steps to that you would take with that possible. And then you have possible response 2 and possible response 3. So number 1, you could just go immediately and call the police department to say there's something going on. Possible response 2 could be maybe you go outside, meet with the people to say, hey, I see you're gathering outside of our business. Just wanted to make sure everything's okay. Do you want cookies? I'm always a fan of cookies and killing. I'm basically addressing things with kindness. So if you address things with kindness, usually things get done in your favor. So possible response 2. And then possible response 3, I'm not sure what that would be yet, but maybe you guys could brainstorm a possible response 3. Some optional items to include. So I would suggest that you get a 3-ring binder. I'm a frugalist, so I would go to the local Dollar Tree, get one of those 1-inch or 1.5-inch 3-ring binders, and you would basically have this page with, and that would be 1 page per crisis. So in a former employer that I worked for, we had a sheet similar to this, and it had 25 pages of possible crises. So when something happened, I would just pull out the form and we would just implement. Then possible items to include a pre-written press release, so you don't have to think about writing a press release in a high-stress environment. A camera for the pictures of the crisis, so maybe you low-key go outside, take a picture. Maybe you're interacting, take a picture of the people rallying, just to make sure that you have documentation that this happened outside of your business. Also, I would have a list of items to grab from a crisis management kit. So that basically means in the kit, you have things that you have your first aid, but you also have things that are good to have in a crisis. So if they are likely to break windows, one thing that I caution people on is to make sure that you have window tape to make sure that you can respond, because you don't want an open window at night that people can easily access your building. You want to have your insurance policy. You want to have, so if anything happens to your building or your space or whatever, you have your go kit. Then the telephone numbers for local press if you need them, and then also having an incident report form. So if someone that is working for you, or even if you are observing the crisis, then you're writing that down. So just in case anything happens, you have documentation that this happened outside of your business, this time, this date, and then how to respond to that, or how you responded to that from an insurance standpoint. And then also I would recommend that you update this 1 or more times a year, and then you can document at the bottom when it has been updated. I know that's a lot of information. What questions do you guys have? It's a lot of info. Okay, so while you're writing things, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, did you say that you made these documents available, or they are available easily?
They are available. Someone could, I mean, I could send them to you, or if people want to email me, I can send them to them directly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because we have a file list, kind of, I guess, for this Teams, and I would love to have this.
Awesome. I sure will.
Yeah, if you want to just email it to me, I can upload it into our files, and everyone on this call can access it through the files on Teams.
That is perfect. I sure will. Then also have a crisis management kit. One thing that I like doing is I set up Google alerts for everything. So I have a COVID-19 Texas small business Google alert. So anytime anything across Texas hits the web, I get an email automatically. So one thing that's really happening that I thought was really inventive in El Paso is that the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in El Paso is creating COVID-19 kits. So you have to have like a utility bill or something that basically, or a sales tax ID, but something that says that you are a legitimate business in El Paso, and because their rates are increasing right now, as of I think yesterday or the day before. But in their kit, they have 20 masks, they have floor decals, they have an infrared thermometer, and this is all for free. They have gloves. I think they had enough, like 20 pairs of gloves. And then they also have hand sanitizers. So I thought that that was a very inventive way that the Chamber of Commerce could, reinvest in the community as well, and especially to work toward a common good for the community. Also in your crisis management kit, and remember that I talked about the crisis management kit under the optional items to include the window coverings and boards. So just in case, even if you have a something go through a window or something happen to the door, make sure you have something that can provide temporary shelter for your building and security for your building to make sure that people cannot access that building who do not need to go urban exploring. Then the first aid kit is very important as well. I know a lot of businesses who do not have a first aid kit. Go to Amazon, purchase a first aid kit. They're going to be on sale on Black Friday. But first aid kits are very important, whether you are a mobile business or you are a fixed business as well. Number 5 is creating an incident report form. So I did not create a form for this one, although I probably should have. But just think about where the incident occurred, the time the incident occurred, when the incident occurred, the people or equipment involved, the picture of the site where the incident occurred, who was contacted about the event, and then the follow-up date with the person who was affected. So to bring you through that entire incident report form, so say if someone had a slip and fall at your business. So the business owner that I talked about a few moments ago who had to go from 50 and 75 people events to 6-person events, she elected to do carpet tiles throughout the space to make sure, and it's a historic building, but she wanted to make sure that none of the patrons or the kids or adults had slip and falls when rain occurred. So she was being very proactive in doing carpet tiles all over the area because you're less likely to fall on carpet than you are on tile. But if she did have a slip and fall, I would recommend that she employ one of these incident report forms. So like where the incident occurred, basically it is, if that occurred in in the tile area, that's where the incident occurred in the building in the tile area. Then the time that it occurred, maybe it was 7 p.m. at night. When the incident occurred, like on the day, you would have the date documented as well. The person or equipment would be, it happened on the tile, and then the person who was the supervisor or the person in charge would be noted as well. a picture of what that looked like. You don't want to do that when someone's on the floor, obviously, but a picture of what that incident or what that floor looked like, that person had that slip and fall. And then also who was contacted about the incident. Did you call your insurance? That would probably be one of the things that you would want to do. And then also a follow-up date. Hey, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Let's make sure that everything, you know, is okay with you. Maybe you want to send a note of some sort, but following up with the person who was affected adversely. And then, last but not least, I love this one. So recently, we've had a lot of interesting weather in Texas. So on the coast in Houston, and I have various friends even in the Lake Charles and Port Arthur area. And so they've had to leave their homes within like a 2-hour notice. And so, you know, you pack up your stuff, but then you think about the things that you left. And it's important for business owners to know what to take and what not to take. So I would recommend, even if you don't have a business, have a go pack. So for instance, and I thought about this because, you know, one or more times I've had to evacuate even from Houston, and I've developed a go pack. It has a table of contents, it has insurance papers, it has passports, it has everything in it. So a go pack for me personally, but also I'm like, you know what, businesses should probably have this too. So go pack for the business. Have copies of the insurance papers, have copies of recent videos or a picture of your space. Take that monthly, because if your building is going to be was affected, you want to make sure that you have the most recent photos of the space in order to send to the insurance agencies. Tax ID forms are very important as well, or anything that you submitted to the comptroller's office or to the Secretary of State. Copies of important paperwork. So if you have your paperwork at home, even if it's in, you know, a safe of some sort at the bank, you also want to make sure that you have a copy of that just in case something happens to that bank. And also, last but not least, make sure that you have copies of the computer files as well, even if that is a small SD card that you can just have in your go pack as well. And don't spend a lot of money on this. I have a go pack, and it's made with Dollar Tree sheet protectors, because if we have rain, you know, the rain will not affect the items that are in the sheet protectors. And it's a Dollar Tree 1.5 inch binder. Have a go pack. I would definitely recommend it. But unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of references for this. A lot of this is based on my personal experience, but and also helping other businesses. But we have one reference, and it's Howell 2019, Fostering Small Business Resilience. But that's it. That's what I have.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? No questions?
Devin?
I do want to address what Patrick dropped in the chat. He put a link for useful resources from the SBA. He said the SBA has a disaster assistance department that has been supporting small businesses following disasters since 1950. So if you can see the chat, you can look at that, but I'll add that if I'm able to download it, I'll add it to our files on Teams as well.
Courtney, if I could chime in for just a second.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, I just wanted to, the reason I put that in there, and I don't know how many small business owners are on the call, but I put that in there because right now there's so many companies, small businesses are failing, and they're failing because they don't know how to access SBA resources. This COVID-19 is new to everybody else, but it's not new to the SBA Office of Disaster Assistance. They've been doing this since 1950s. They've been jumping in and helping folks after disaster since 1950. Obviously, they haven't been doing it on this large scale where it's every single state across the nation and so forth. Typically, it's a part of a state or it's a region of the country that's affected by disaster, and they're able to handle that. But now they're having to handle every single state in the U.S., all across the U.S. So what they typically support in a month's time during a disaster, they're now supporting in a day's time. I mean, literally, that's how this office is. But they have the infrastructure, and they have all the tools and resources to help folks during a disaster. So I just want to let folks know you don't have to wait until a disaster to reach out to the Office of Disaster Assistance. You can reach out to them now, and they will help you create a disaster plan. My office actually has a disaster plan. So when COVID-19 hit, all we did was flip a switch, and we were already executing on our disaster plan. And that's the way small businesses need to be. If you just go out there and create that disaster plan now, when a disaster hits, you just flip a switch and you start executing. Thank you.
And also, I'm so sorry, which organization? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, sure. Which organization are you with?
I'm with the Veterans Business Outreach Center here at the University of Texas at Arlington. So I am the SBA for veterans in Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas.
Awesome. It's very nice to meet you.
You as well.
Also, in addition to the SBA funding, it's interesting. So on September the 31st, they stopped some of the EIDL loans when it comes to funding small businesses who had interruption with paying employees or making ends meet with their operations and maintenance for their spaces. But the interesting thing is, if you're located in a space, and I think it's 50,000 people or less, USDA actually launched their EIDL equivalent for small businesses as well. So that's also an option for our Texas small businesses in rural areas. But yeah, they're just like my mom used to say, as a small business owner, you have to be prepared for nothing. So you have to be prepared for everything that that could possibly happen for your business, because you never know.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edwards. Did anybody have any last thoughts they would like to share, questions for her?
Did anyone learn anything new?
I learned a lot. And I'm not a business owner, but I am in communications. And I think this is a great way to just prepare for anything that can happen to your business. Obviously, we didn't see this happening to everyone's business in 2020, but I love seeing how, like, Patrick had those plans in place. So they just pulled out whatever they needed out of their kit and they were ready to implement it. So they weren't in shock, because I think a lot of companies were really in shock. And I got 800,000 emails saying, due to COVID-19, due to COVID-19. It was the same message, but nobody was being effective. So it's really interesting to see how you can prepare for that and make sure that your messaging is going to help your business and not, make you lose money and not being able to keep your business alive. So thank you so much. We do meet here every Thursday. EpICMavs is open to everyone. So if you know anybody outside of UTA, they're absolutely welcome to join us. We are also starting a YouTube page. So if you miss any of our meetings, I'll be uploading our meetings onto YouTube. And then we've got a few really exciting things happening in November. We have Startup Weekend, which is a 3-day competition. You learn to build a business within 3 days. So if anybody is interested in that, you can see information for Startup Weekend in our files. And we will also be participating in this year's Global Entrepreneurship Week. That starts November 16th through the 20th. Registration is open. It's all virtual this year, so you can join any of the sessions throughout the week, and that information is in the files as well. Any other questions before we sign off? No? Okay, I'll stop recording. Thank you so much, Dr. Edwards. I really appreciate your